Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Welcome to the Encounter program. We're so glad that you are here. I am Reverend Rachel Helgeson, the pastor at Northminster Presbyterian Church. Today is a rare opportunity where you get to have 4 hosts for one, and we rotate who gets to host the hosts. So it was my pick of the straw, so here we are. You probably very much recognize these other folks as well. We've got Reverend Jeff Kellam, who was one of the first ordained pastors in broadcasting, so in the Presbyterian Church USA, along with Mr. Rogers. So thanks that you're here. We have Reverend Joe Sellepack, who you probably know both as a pastor, but also as the director of the CHOW and Broome County Council of Churches. So glad you're here too. And my colleague who lives just on the corner, Reverend Mark Kimpland, who is the pastor at First United Methodist Church, and we're so glad you're here too. It's nice to see all of your faces, and that we continue to gather in ways that are different, but also in ways that we can be able to talk to one another from north and south and east and west. So today's topic is about, well, we've made it through a year of COVID, and we're on to year 2. and churches and congregations and faith communities have had to consider what now. Vaccinations are out. Some of our older folks, I imagine, have gotten some of the vaccinations. Some have not, for various reasons. They've just opened in New York State up to with 16-year-olds and older, so that's changed things, but then there's a timeline of what that looks like. So I'm just wondering what your experience has been, I would say even like within the last 3 months, with the change with having vaccinations be available for older folks, and has that changed what you've heard from colleagues in your denominations or colleagues within the community, what they're doing, and what, particularly if you are leading a church, what has that looked like in your congregation too?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I was just reflecting last month that it had been a year since I had the director of public health on Encounter. You know, it was such a weird experience to think that it's been 1 year, and we have had quite a year with lots of road bumps and lots of misconceptions and misinformation that has gone out from various sources, and people have a lot of questions, and I have found that to be a little, now that they know who the director of public health is, now that they've had Jason Garner, and others who have made announcements, who are telling people what to do, a lot of the misinformation has kind of gone away, but still there's the impatience to try to get people wanting to go to normal, whatever normal is going to be. And so people in my church are still, they're supposed to be wearing masks all the time, but they find it easier to take them off when they're not, and other kinds of things like that, where you're trying to keep people safe, but they still think that, that there isn't, that some of the precautions that have been put in place are necessarily there. So I found it to be difficult to try to figure out how to maneuver it and how to open up, especially, my church is a very small church, and most of the people there have already been vaccinated, and so they're asking the question, well, why should we wear masks? And the answer is, well, because whenever a business is open, whenever you're open to the public, you have to wear a mask because just because, it's just the way that life is right now, and you have to do it for the other people that may be coming in that have not been vaccinated. So it's still a tough thing to get people to think through.
Mark, have you had a similar situation with your congregation, or?
Yeah, no doubt it is. As a matter of fact, I'm finding the present situation more difficult to navigate than the previous situation. Especially when we were closed and there was no in-person worship. We've been having in-person worship now for months, but very regulated. And it's probably a third of our congregation is in person. The other 2/3 are joining us online. And I liken it to this. It feels like right now that I'm constantly having a foot on the accelerator and then a foot on the brake. And we're moving forward, not so fast. All right, let's kind of back it off and such things, and especially around Palm Sunday and Easter, where people were so ready to kind of get back, and it was just awkward for the second year in a row to say, yes, Christ has risen, but please stay home. That was tough. That was difficult, and it was more difficult than not having in-person worship last Easter, where our doors were closed. But this year, our doors were open. It worked out great, but it's still that kind of push-pull, go-stop kind of thing with folks. And the other thing that's been really apparent is just how diverse Endwell United Methodist Church is, as most of our churches are diverse, and the politics that goes into all of this gets expressed, and that's difficult. That's difficult to hear all sides and such things, because I'm sure we've all heard, well, why can't we? We should move in this direction, and the other folks are saying, no, we have to move in this direction. So it's just kind of assimilating all that information and all the things that people are hearing, and doing it with grace and moving forward boldly.
How about Jeff? I know that you worship. How has your congregation been handling this, and where do you find yourself?
From what Mark said, I'm thinking of the worship wars that used to be about music.
Yeah. They still are.
Yeah. And now we've added to that this layer of be safe or don't care. And I don't mean that casually, but our church has not yet opened up. But as of today, it is open. We have been closed. We have an old building. The stained glass windows have been sealed up by plexiglass to protect them, and so they don't open. So there's no air movement. And so these older church buildings, I think, are among the last to reopen. So the decision was made, and I'm not on the session of the church. I'm a retired person serving as a parish associate, which is kind of not quite an honorary title, but so I've not been in on the decision making. But I understand that we've been extra careful, and we have a lot of older members, so we've been very careful about that. So the decision was made, all right, I think we can start opening up now. People are getting vaccinated, and if we do all the protocols, we should be okay. We didn't want to open on Easter because we were afraid that a lot of folks might show up for Easter, and suddenly the numbers, would go up, and we wouldn't be able to handle it in terms of social distancing. So April 18th, we open, and we will not be singing. I'm not sure there'll be responses. I think we will be masked. In fact, I know we will be. The sanitizer, the pews are all marked off, so we'll be very careful, and we expect maybe 35, 40 people will come back at first. So, and it will be an abbreviated service. We're also going to be. We've been streaming. Well, no, we haven't been streaming. We've been producing a worship service each week with people either reading the scriptures from home or in the church. And then the music has been by our 4 musical people, and on a screen that looks just like this. So now we're going to start streaming, and that creates most churches don't have internet in the sanctuary. You got it in a church office, but in order to have it a powerful signal that gets up and doesn't keep freezing up. So that's what we're doing. And a little bit later on in the program, Rachel asked me about what I found online about some other churches, because I didn't want us just to talk about our own churches.
Sure.
A limited sample.
Yeah, so my congregation was in session during the summertime, and then we were just streaming until Palm Sunday, and folks did want to come back. So Palm Sunday, we had a soft opening with just a team to prepare for folks on Easter because there's a similar concern. So we had overflow, which was interesting. I felt like I was on a Megatron, which is a different experience for this mainline pastor. Some of my colleagues who are in my doctoral program would be like, well, we do that every week. So like, what's the deal, Rachel? But it was interesting. I found that the one thing I have found through this pandemic, though, is the grief that has been evident, particularly around funerals. I had recently done just to look to see, and I think I've done at least one funeral a month, and then there are others that I haven't done yet that have been put on pause until this summer if the way be clear. So, and in speaking with funeral directors, they've said that they've just been nonstop, that it's not uncommon right now for every funeral home in this region to have at least 4 or 5 funerals a day, which is not usual for them. So they're just really grateful for a clergy that have been part of that, and to help them out, because it's just been coordinating one person after the other. Part of it has been COVID, but the other part has just been regular health issues that some of them got put on pause while dealing with the imminent danger of COVID. And so some things happen that way, and some were just irregular, things that happen at the end of life. So it's been interesting. And I'm talking to some other colleagues, like there's the congregation that's immediately next door to me, the Ukrainian Russian Baptist Church. They've been open the whole time. They have not closed. So they've remained open. And I know that my dad's church, he's out in Masonville. They are a federated Presbyterian and Baptist and non-denominational church. So their timeline has been a little bit different because they're out in the country, and in Delaware County, the numbers have been different. So they were open when we were closed, and then they just closed recently because the numbers went up in Delaware County. So it's interesting to be watching that as well, to hear from other denominational backgrounds how they've been handling it. I know that for some folks, it's been interesting to see how they're dealing with folks with masks. I've talked to some other colleagues. It depends on the congregation. My congregation is, I would say, purple, which means that we have people on both ends of the spectrum politically. So that's similarly to Mark, has brought different conversations to the table. But I know some congregations that are more blue, and I'm using this with political terms, but I don't mean that they are necessarily aligned with all the politics. I'm going to make sure that I say that. They've been a little more conservative, and some that have been more on the red side have been less with masks and open more frequently. So it's interesting how those things have aligned. And so if you're just joining us now, we're really glad that you're here. We're talking about COVID time part 2. And I'm Reverend Rachel Helgeson from Northminster Presbyterian Church. We have Reverend Jeff Kellam, and Reverend Joe Sellepack, and Reverend Mark Kimpland. And if you recognize all these names, yes, we are all the hosts, and we are hosting ourselves. So to talk about our own congregations and our own experiences, but also what we've heard from others and within our faith communities. And so I would like to turn over to Jeff for just a moment, what he's heard when doing a quick search from local other congregations outside of our scope of congregations.
Yeah, before we went on the air, I was mentioning that I went on to some websites to see what other churches were doing. And found out that some websites are so totally out of date, they're not kept up. They really ought to be up day by day, and I've realized a lot of churches don't have the personnel to do that, but certainly week by week or month by month. But you shouldn't see a website that's 6 months out of date giving information about a church that's open that's really not open or whatever. So I went to Holy Trinity Church in Binghamton and found that they have a Zoom coffee hour.
They do.
Their service is on Trinity YouTube at 10 o'clock. And they're encouraging by their website for people to do a passing of the peace video that would be inserted into their program. It says the church is open even though the building is closed. St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Endicott.
And Jeff, they're a lot like your church, where they have a person who edits their service for them. Greg Keeler.
Yeah.
He does all of the editing. It takes them hours. It takes them days to put together the worship service so that it goes out to in a way that they're happy with.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. It's a very difficult process that they go through in order to make that work.
And our conversion from the pre-recorded service that Ryan DeLapp of Engaged Entertainment, he's a member of the church, a child of the church, grew up in the church. He's not only helped our church now begin to move into streaming with 3 cameras and the whole bit, but he's also gone to the First Presbyterian Union Church in Owego to consult with them. He's also convert over the Clark Summit Presbyterian Church. I'm not, this is a shout out to Ryan for the technical help, because the Union Presbyterian Church hired him part-time to do this for us week by week by week, because it does take a lot of time.
Yeah.
So St. Paul's Episcopal Church, Endicott, on March 21st, they started coming back to church. No reservations, just come, it says. They have services at 8 and 10. And then they have a Monday through Saturday, 9:30 a.m. via Zoom gathering.
Yeah. You can see them on Facebook.
Yeah. The pastor's Facebook page, and then they have worship.
John Martin Nicchio.
Thank you.
Yeah.
First Presbyterian Church, Johnson City, they have a 10 o'clock service, and they use Facebook for theirs.
Yeah, they do.
So lots of different models here.
And you can see them all, which is really great.
Yeah.
People in my church will watch 3 worship services. Mark, yours gets watched by people from my church.
Okay.
So they go on, they'll watch your service,
Mhm.
they'll watch First Pres, they'll watch Trinity, they'll go through them all, and then they'll come back and say, I feel like I've been to church all day long. But yeah.
And most of these services are a little bit clipped. We're not doing the full worship service that we would have done, I guess, on Sunday morning, just to keep it a little bit shorter. We worship not only at Union Presbyterian Church via, I guess we're on YouTube, but my son's church is on Facebook, I think.
Yeah.
And he's in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, and we go there every week, and we started making contributions to that church. Like we're part of the congregation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen, it's been interesting because we do Zoom internally, but we do Facebook for folks who want to visit with us. And we've seen an uptick of people from around the world who have been joining us. So
Yeah.
from Africa and Europe and across the country, which has been interesting just because they're curious about what's happening in other worshiping communities. And so I think there's a silver lining to all this, which it's so easy to focus on the difficult stuff. And let's be real, there have been pastors. If you have a pastor, please love on them and tell them how great they're doing.
Exactly.
If they like cookies or favorite coffee, we endorse that. Because it has been a hard year for a lot of reasons. But I think we all have seen too some silver lining to it, which has been there's been a growth about being brothers and sisters in Christ across denominational lines. For those of you that are in other faith traditions outside of the Christian church, I know that I've heard the similar thing within our Jewish neighbors, that they have also seen a growth in being able to work together. And same with our Muslim and Hindu friends too. I've heard this, that across community faith lines we've been able to talk. I know that United Binghamton, a Presbyterian, had during Ramadan last year, had some Muslim folks join their Bible study just to be able to have an interfaith dialogue. So what an amazing thing we can talk about during this time, how, yes, there are things that divide us, but what brings us together, and where's the hope? I have been flabbergasted by it, but also so moved by that peace that even in the midst of all that's going on. I'm just wondering, have the rest of y'all experienced this cross-cultural, like whether Bible studies or book gatherings or worship, that you've seen different folks? I mean, I hear you saying people worshiping in different places, but have you experienced any of these other sorts of possibilities in your circles?
Well, yeah, I've actually been very taken by how many people are searching for religious significance in their life right now. One of the things that the pandemic did was it stripped us away of all the busyness, and so you end up coming back to the center, which is a very holy place in my estimation of it. Even if it is a place of grief and a place of loss at times, it's also a place where hope resides. And you can't have, in my estimation of the resurrection, you can't have that without the cross. They come together in some way. And so, like the lectionary reading for this next week is on Thomas, or on Jesus appearing to the disciples, them mistaking him for a ghost, and then Jesus inviting them to touch and to feel and to see him, in a way that makes them understand he's not just a ghost. This is real stuff. We carry with us all of this baggage into COVID, and we have to process it somehow. And my estimation of the religious hunger, one of the things that they're saying is that there have been a great uptick in people looking for spiritual direction. They're looking for counseling. They're looking for places of healing and wholeness, primarily because of this. They're looking for hope. They're looking for resurrection to occur. Touch them, feel them, see their need, and then move into ministry. That seems to me where the church is constantly at that junction point between what we've lost and where we're headed. We're always caught in that middle point. And I think that there's a lot of hunger in the world right now for people who are looking for those types of deeper relationships.
Yeah, I've definitely seen from some of my non-religious friends or friends who have stepped away from church have been turning to ask me questions, which has been interesting, because my life, unbeknownst to popular behavior, I was not a pastor my whole life. So as a career person, so folks.
You have an amazing voice there, Rachel. So yeah, she was an opera singer, right? I think, yeah, for a period of time. So we should brag on her too. She is a really she's a really talented person. Yeah, I played the ukulele for her and she sang, so I know these things.
Move on quickly.
Mark, how about
you? One of the
you?
things I just wanted to kind of add to it, we've really seen that hunger with our youth. We decided almost in the beginning of the year to bring our youth back in person. And I was struck. They came back as different people, hurting in ways that you couldn't even imagine. And it was really ironic that the last time they got together, which was almost a year prior, doing a 30-hour famine, fasting for 30 hours and such. And the idea of that 30-hour famine is many of these kids in third world countries don't have school, aren't educated. And we were talking about, what if you couldn't go to school? And that's the last thing that they remember. And they were just, we've had them back now in person for probably 3 months now. And they are just hungering, thirsting to be together and to work through this together. So I just wanted to add that poignant thought of our children, our youth, who are also making their way through this difficult time.
Absolutely. I know it's been very hard for teachers to every day their schedules change every week, and so along with that comes with the children and youth that have been going through that, and the parents and guardians that are. I mean, it's been taking villages of people to keep kids going and keep things happening, and this is one place where churches have been at their best, have been a good point of connection. It's been interesting to see how many text messages I've received, or social media things from my youth and children, to just like that they're checking in. One of the things that our group has done is put Sunday school bags on people's doors for the little ones.
Oh, wow.
And I keep hearing back from grandparents and parents how they've had these meaningful conversations at home that they wouldn't have had before about their faith. I mean, amazing. And also,
Yeah.
wow, yeah, some things.
I've seen that happen with adult education at our church. I teach the adult class, and I've had more people in the Microsoft Teams meeting online than I would have had in the live classroom, because there's a hunger for this.
Yeah.
Well, friends, we're so grateful that you joined us here on the Encounter program, and you've gotten to hear from all of our voices, from Reverend Joe Sellepack, from Reverend Mark Kimpland, and lastly, you heard from Reverend Jeff Kellam. We've been talking about how COVID has affected congregations and faith communities, and particularly in our own community here in the Southern Tier, and the ones that we know of. And I'm sure you have your own stories as well, but if you have a moment, just give a high five to your faith leaders. Love them, and that God loves them too. And that I know it's easy to get stuck on the hard things, but as you heard at the end, there are some beautiful things that are happening right now. There is hope in the midst of what may seem like an endless forever. So we are grateful for you tuning in with us, and we hope that you take on this hope in your daily life. Thanks for joining us on Encounter. Bye-bye.